Mark, what are the keys to conducting an effective listing presentation?
Well, an effective listing presentation is one where you come away with a signature.
Of course, that's right.
Now, the key components, I think, and I think this has changed dramatically inside of the real estate transaction over the last 10 years really, is that you've got to have 100% product knowledge. But the weird phenomena these days is that you really only are likely to use about 10% of everything that you have on board.
Why is that?
Well, I'm finding that people are time poor these days and they're expectant of instant competency. Now, so you need to be able to demonstrate or at least have the aura of being thoroughly competent and then be able to decipher with your initial exchange with that potential prospect as to which 10% you put in front of them, because you get it wrong, you miss the listing.
So how do you know? How do you know what to put in front of them?
Well, you know, there are some fairly obvious variables. They, of course, are price advice and comparative price versus market value. The second one might be fees and charges and what the investment needs to be around marketing. They're the more obvious ones. But I prefer, if you like, to set up a premise by which they're choosing me based upon my ability around marketing, negotiation, and of course communication. I mean, most estate agents, they know that they need to have marketing investment, but they can't really explain to you
why.
Well, in the first instance, precisely what marketing is.
Oh, okay.
Now, marketing's about creating perceptions, and those perceptions, of course, become a reality to the recipient. The second thing is, as it relates to marketing, how it is that marketing actually leverages value beyond comparison, beyond compare. Now, I hear a lot of salespeople say that a property's worth what a buyer or the market's prepared to bear. I think that's nonsense. I think a good salesperson says a property's worth what I can make it worth. So if I can create a perception so that that property looks at the very least its best, but in some ways better than it actually is, then I stand a very good chance of leveraging that value beyond comparison into an area that I call market value.
Okay, give me an example of how you could do that.
Well, it's very simple. It might be video marketing, it might be the angulation of the photographs, it might be the way in which you arrange the furniture. All of these things these days are available to us. You know, even this might sound like a very simple one, but I was in Brisbane the other day and we listed a property, and we basically gave the house a name. Now, the owners looked at me and thought that was a bit far-fetched to start with, but as soon as we did, all of the prospects that were coming through, this was an acreage property, started to refer to it by name, and it gave it the right, I guess, aura.
Mark, let's talk about price, the big stumbling block for a lot of agents in the presentation.
Well, the first thing you've got to do is create some clarification. There's a vast chasm between price and value. My favourite response in a listing presentation when a seller says to me, "What's my property worth?" is I basically say to them, "I don't know." Because if we're to be honest, if we're to talk about market value, we can't be certain as to where that sits without actually taking it to market. Now, there's a load of things that you bring to the property in promotion, marketing, the negotiation, setting the right parameters with buyers, and then of course the communication that you might have that can leverage that value. And then of course, if two people like the same property, then the scarcity principle comes into play. So, you know, a lot of agents, I should say, don't fully understand the difference between the two. There's a fabulous book out there, and it's called Priceless by a guy called William Poundstone. And it talks about how buyers anchor or get their reference point for value in a real estate transaction. I think it's a weird phenomena that, you know, buyers, if they chose to, could readily source information on comparative value of properties prior to actually going ahead with the purchase, but they rarely do. So this tells us that it is still an emotional transaction. It tells us that if we as salespeople understand all of the principles that underpin pricing and value, then we can manipulate this to the advantage of our clients.
So Mark, you're saying there's a difference between comparative value and market value?
Most definitely. You know, comparative value is the realistic assessment, and as I say, it's the fodder by which valuers base their realistic appraisal of value. So what I say is valuers calculate value. Now, in contrast, we should be, as real estate salespeople, focused on market value. Now, market value is not based upon reality, it's based upon possibility. So as I say, valuers calculate worth, whereas marketers create value.
Hello and welcome to this week's auction update. We're going to have a look at what's happening with auctions right around Australia coming up this weekend, and we'll give you the final numbers from the last week as well. Joining me from CoreLogic will be Kevin Brogan. We'll be back in just a moment.
Did you know you can save up to 70% on your staff costs by outsourcing the low-value, repeatable tasks so your team can focus on growing your business? Beepo is an outsourcing provider focused on the real estate industry. With an English-speaking, tertiary qualified and fully trained team in the Philippines, Beepo will give your business the boost it needs to start growing and returning value to you. For more information, visit beepo.com.au.
Welcome back to the show, and today we're broadcasting from Brisbane. We're actually at the Rain and Horn headquarters in Ascot. Quite a nice building, Kevin.
It is, and a lovely day too.
Yeah, beautiful day. Oh, well, every day is beautiful in Queensland.
I've heard.
So they tell me. Okay, well, let's have a look at what's happened with the final auction numbers from the last week, Kevin. The weighted average we can see on the screen there at 58%.
Yeah, that's up a little on last week. It was 57.7 last week, and that was a 12-month high. So we've managed to get just above that.
Yeah. I guess, is that a reflection that the market still is showing a bit of confidence?
Yeah, look, I think it is. Those comments we've seen about confidence, they're definitely showing in these results. Obviously, there's the longer-term game looking at results as we move through the next few weeks, but it's definitely in those results.
Well, let's have a look at the results and break them down by cap city. Sydney, 61.8%. How does that compare to what we've seen recently?
Yeah, so 61.8% is actually down 0.3% on last week.
Yep.
But bearing in mind last week was that 12-month high, it is only very marginally down on that. So it's still showing that confidence.
And Melbourne too at 61.6%. Very, very close there, obviously, those two cap cities.
Look, it is, and you know, although Melbourne's come in sort of a very close second to Sydney this week, they can take heart from the fact that that actually is the highest for the last 12 months and is an improvement on last week.
Yeah, well, that's good. And those auction numbers have held up fairly well as well. Brisbane at 30.4, that's about average.
Look, it is. We've seen in Brisbane sort of between high 20s, and we even just cracked the 40%, but it is just a little bit more volatile with that sort of lower auction numbers.
And we are seeing continuing good numbers in Canberra as well at 52.3%, Perth at 31%, and Adelaide at 39%. So.
Yeah, that's a little bit low for Adelaide.
You're a bit disappointed there, are you?
Just a little, just a little.
Okay, well, let's have a look at the auction numbers coming up in the next week. Obviously, this is reflected in long weekend in Sydney and in Melbourne, not so much in Brisbane.
No, that's right. I mean, so for Brisbane this week, we're actually seeing a significant increase in the number of auctions, 148 this week compared to 104 last week. But in Sydney, we're down to 287, and that, as you say, reflects the long weekend. For whatever reason, Melbourne really does show the impact of a long weekend more than Sydney, so we're right down to 193 auctions for the week.
Okay, well, Brisbane, that's a pretty good result, even though, I mean, we're getting used to seeing Brisbane at or around 100. To get to nearly 150, that's a pretty good sign.
That is quite a big week for Brisbane. So as you know, we watch these results really carefully. That is going to be an interesting result to watch in the context of that increased confidence.
Excellent. Well, that's it for this week. That's what's coming up this weekend. Kevin will join me again on Monday when we'll bring you the results from the weekend. Any tips? Where do you think we're going to be? I guess Melbourne and Sydney with those low numbers, can we expect to be in the 60s, do you think?
Yeah, look, what we quite often see, Kevin, is that the results are consistent on a low volume weekend. The unknown, though, is that volatility that enters into the data set. When you have such a small sample, if it isn't consistent, then I don't think we can read too much into it.
No.
The significance will be measured over the longer term.
Yeah. More interesting, I guess, to watch that Brisbane market. It'd be good to see that tick up now.
It's the place to be.
Yeah, if we're seeing, exactly. If we're seeing confidence with sellers coming onto the market, we may see a similar confidence with buyers. So that'll be interesting to watch.
Absolutely. No, I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay, we'll watch that. Kevin Brogan will join me from CoreLogic again on Monday, and we'll give you the full wrap from the week. Thanks for being with us. Look forward to seeing you on Monday.
Thank you.
Evening, Clara. Home, please.
David, what's on your mind?
I was just thinking of a different time is all. It was a time when I used to sit up there, you know. Driving wasn't just about being taken from place to place, but going somewhere. Feeling something along the way.
Please, David, you should relax.
I'm afraid that's just the problem.
David, where are you going? David? David?